couple announcements and then we'll get started here for Bible class. So, does anyone have any announcements for the sake of the whole group? Okay, Art.
Life Chain is today at 2 p.m. on Stroop Road. We meet at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church on Stroop Road at 2 p.m. and it lasts 1 hour, no more. So come on out. Somebody will have signs and will be spaced out on the street for our Life Chain.
And I believe the details are also in the back of the bulletin. I think the details are also on the back of the bulletin. If you want to see the Life Chain at 2 o'clock, Stroop Road. Okay. All right. Any other announcements, Allison?
We have 2 weeks till auction donations need to be here if you want them included in the auction donation advertising and catalog. So October 15th is the deadline for the auction.
All right. A couple other hands. Okay, Dylan?
Things go well over the next week or so. We'll be swapping out Wi-Fi throughout the entire church. You'll notice a brand new VLC guest access point. Feel free to use that one. It'll give you 2 hours of access and it should be good. And if you have any questions about how to get back into the Wi-Fi or whatever else, let me or Alex probably know.
All right. Any other announcements for the sake of the whole group? Okay, Allison is more than Maggie.
I meant to say one.
Okay, all right.
The marriage retreat is coming up at the end of this month, because it is October now. It's the last Saturday in this month, and information for that is in the bulletin. There's limited space, but it is going to be from 9 to 4 at Bergamo over at Beaver Creek. Cost is $25, but all the details are on the sign up, and the QR code is in your music notes.
And I got the presentation done, so we're ready to roll. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. All right.
Who and where do we pay the money?
Where do we pay the money? Just bring it to the church office.
Yeah, we'll deal with that. Like, once people have signed up, you'll get information. Yeah.
Okay. Any other announcements for the sake of the whole group? I did make a quick phone call to Todd Berenger, and it is now the call season is upon us officially. So I gave him a phone call yesterday, and he is at least open to the idea of receiving a call and relocating. So keep prayers for Todd and Brooke Berenger and our call committee. And we are in the process of scheduling a site visit for in-person interviews here at Bethlehem in the near future. So more details to follow.
Lots of prayers.
Lots of prayers. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Tamara. Everybody applaud Tamara. Thank you. If you didn't notice, coming in, we finally have, it's going to be grass. For all you mowers are going to be happy, just don't clog the light. Thank you for all your work, and thank you for all the ones who took home flowers and made homes for them.
There'll be more flowers to come.
Uh-oh. You and I got to talk.
All right. Any other announcements? Going once, going twice. All right. I'm going to give the catechism du jour, and then we'll dismiss for Sunday school, and then we'll introduce our guest. All right. 5th commandment. So let's repeat after me. You shall not murder.
You shall not murder.
We should fear and love God.
We should fear and love God.
So that we do not.
So that we do not.
Hurt or harm our neighbor in his body.
Hurt or harm our neighbor in his body.
But help and support him.
But help and support him.
In every physical need.
In every physical need.
All right, Sunday school is dismissed. For those of you who are in first service, you got to meet Pastor Salming, but he is back. The Miami Valley Lutherans for Life has done an excellent job in bringing Pastor Salming to us on a regular basis now to help equip us and encourage us to be gospel-motivated voices for life. And I think one of the greatest parts is that he's actually able to come visit us at our churches and give of his time and energy and share a great message with us. And now we get him on Sunday morning, so it's nice to have him with us. And he'll visit Bethlehem Lutheran School tomorrow morning, especially with the middle school children. And they absolutely love him and the message that he brings. So we were thinking, what kind of topic would we have Pastor Salmink present to us today? And he calls it Stump the Chump, but I would just say open forum. All right, it's open forum. Like there are a lot of challenges and opportunities when it comes to being gospel-motivated voices for life in our day and age and in our society. And feel free to ask him easy questions, medium questions, and hard questions, and how things are going, as challenging us and equipping us to be gospel-motivated voices for life. So, Pastor Salmink, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
I suppose we could call it Q&A.
That sounds good.
That would be fine as well. But I will prime the pump by answering kind of two of the most common questions that we get. First of all, what does Lutherans for Life do? Well, Pastor Woody sort of stole my thunder. We equip Lutherans and their neighbors to be gospel-motivated voices for life, and I'm so glad that he understands and internalizes that mission. Lutherans for Life has been around for about 44 years. Started by a group of Lutherans from actually a variety of denominations, variety of Lutheran church bodies, got together and decided we wanted to have a Lutheran voice about the sanctity of life after the Roe v. Wade decision. So it has grown. Today, Lutherans for Life has tens of thousands of donors and members across the United States. We have over 100 volunteer communities like Miami Valley Lutherans for Life. We call them Life Teams, Life Chapters, and state federations that exist to declare the sanctity of life and demonstrate it in their communities. So what Lutherans for Life does is, as a national organization, we help people like yourselves know what to say about the sanctity of life, when to say it, and where and how to take action. We have a variety of resources that we provide that do that, from Life Sunday congregational worship materials to an extensive library of educational and informational booklets and brochures. We are firmly feet planted in the digital age. We have a robust YouTube channel and an extensive web archive of videos, podcasts, sermons, Bible studies, devotional materials to help you know what to say about a wide variety of life issues, not just surprise pregnancy, abortion, beginning of life, but sanctity of life in the whole spectrum of human context. We also provide opportunities for Lutherans to get together. So our national conference is happening in about, let's see, what is this? First weekend in October, so about 2 more weeks. The third weekend of October, well, maybe it'll be, yeah. We'll be hosting folks from across the country in Rock Island, Illinois, Quad Cities, kind of central Missouri area, Mississippi River area of Iowa, Illinois. We've already got over 150 people registered for that. We're going to have three big keynote speakers. Melissa Oden is a survivor of abortion, so she was born as a result of a failed abortion attempt in Sioux City, Iowa, and she's an international speaker on the sanctity of life and has a wonderful story to tell about her life and how she found her birth mother and reconciled. We're also having Jeannie Mancini, who is the president of the National March for Life. It takes place every year in Washington, D.C. She's been doing that for several years. Very elegant, dignified lady. We're looking forward to hearing about what their plans are for the future now that we have exited the Roe v. Wade age. And then our third keynote speaker is Steve Deace, who some of you will recognize as a nationally syndicated conservative talk radio host. He has been at our conferences before several years back, so we're looking forward to welcoming him back. We're going to have 16 different breakout sessions on a variety of educational topics, from human development in the womb to how can I take action in my community, to human trafficking, to critical race theory, going to evaluate all of that through the lens of the sanctity of life and the word of the Lord and educate you to be able to advocate for the sanctity of life in your community. Then we're also having another conference in Washington, D.C. in conjunction with the March for Life in January of 2023. The march is still happening. We'll be there, and that conference will bring together youth and grown-ups, and so we'll have two separate tracks. The youth will have their own conference in their own area of the hotel. The grown-ups will have their conference in their area of the hotel. We're very excited about the opportunity to march together with hundreds of thousands of other gospel-motivated Voices for Life as one big Lutheran community. We usually get about 300 or 400 people there, and you know the Lutherans because they are praying the Lord's Prayer, confessing the Apostles' Creed, and singing hymns. And we really stand out with our green hats. So if you've never been, that's a fantastic opportunity. One of the most joyful celebrations of the sanctity of life. The March for Life is not a protest, it's a demonstration, it's a testimony and a celebration to the entire. We get people from around the world at that march. There are groups that are playing the drums, there are high schools that are chanting, everybody's flying banners, and just having a good time and genuinely declaring to the culture how precious every human life is. So we also have a robust youth division called Y for Life that connects with congregations, schools, and universities across the country to help them give voice to the sanctity of life and take action in their communities. We have a post-abortion healing ministry called Word of Hope. It is a 24-hour hotline and text service that's answered by a live person, Deaconess Chrissy Gillette, who is also a doctor of psychology, and she has experience in suicide prevention and clinical counseling in both military and civilian contexts. She's this wonderful unicorn that we have who brings the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who are dealing with life-issue crises and who are healing from the guilt and grief of participating in the abortion of their own children in the past. So that's just sort of a broad 50,000-foot level overview of what your ministry, Lutherans for Life, is doing. We are entirely donor-supported. We're not a division of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or any other church body. We're a self-standing, independent nonprofit, and that means we speak for you. And so we're grateful for your support, and you can know that we are doing lots of things on your behalf, and we would be just excited and delighted if you would do the simple thing of signing up to receive our email updates so you can continue to get that information. Suffer and celebrate with us. It makes our crosses lighter and our celebrations brighter when we have you to celebrate with. So that's sort of question number one that we frequently get is, what does Lutherans for Life do? The second question that we frequently get is, what's next? Right? Now that the Supreme Court has reversed or vacated Roe v. Wade, what is next? Well, we do give thanks to God for removing the burden, the shackles of the Roe v. Wade framework. The problem with Roe v. Wade was not so much that it persecuted the gospel of Jesus Christ, but it was bad law. It was bad public policy. And after 50 years, I'm glad that folks finally came to their senses and realized that. But the Dobbs decision has not outlawed abortion. All it has done is remove the handcuffs, so now the playing field is leveled, so to speak. There are some states that have tightened their restrictions on abortion access since the Dobbs decision. There are some states that have actually expanded abortion access since the Dobbs decision. And this is the new normal. This is the lay of the land now. It's going to be a patchwork, which means we've got to multiply our gospel-motivated voices by 50. Right? We used to have a central audience that we could speak to in the federal government. Now it appears that the federal government's going to have less to say, although you should know some of your elected representatives in Congress are hard at work trying to enshrine mandatory abortion access in the law of the land. So continue to advocate to them. But now your state legislators are also very hard at work. And they need your support, encouragement, and input as well. There are about 16 to 20 states right now that have really, I guess you would say, good abortion restrictions on the books. Some of those states, there have been courts that have placed a stay on those laws, so they're not into effect yet. They're working their way through the courts. This is how it's going to be for years to come. There's going to be state level laws that are evaluated before courts and through the court system. Dobbs is not going to be the last word that the Supreme Court says about abortion access in the United States. If anything, abortion jurisprudence is going to increase. So don't let up. Don't stop paying attention. I do tell people that the bad news is it's almost as if the Dobbs decision came a beat too late. And here's why. There is a parallel court case working its way through the American court system that has to do with the distribution of chemical abortion substances. Little brief history. In 2000, the abortion pill, RU486 is what its clinical trial name was. Its trade name is mifepristone. That was made legal in the United States. So it's been legal for about 20 years. And because that medication is so dangerous, now you will not hear this from media and politicians, but your local medical professionals should be responsible enough to give you this information, and I'm sharing it with you. There are people that die every year from medication abortions. The rate of complication from chemical abortions is higher than the rate of complication from surgical abortions. What are the complications? Well, severe pain, extended hemorrhaging. Perhaps you've been told that a chemical abortion is like miscarrying or like your regular monthly cycle. It's actually nothing like your regular monthly cycle. Talking extreme discomfort that lasts for days at a time, severe hemorrhaging that in many cases requires blood transfusions. The worst complication is retained tissue, or what's called incomplete abortion. Because what happens in a chemical abortion is there are actually two medications that mother has to take. The first, mifepristone, cuts off the supply of blood to the placenta, so baby starves and suffocates to death. And then, within 48 hours, she takes a second medication called misoprostol, and that induces labor. So the baby is kicked out by the contractions of the uterine lining. Sometimes those contractions are not strong enough to detach and expel all of the tissue. When there is retained tissue, you have to have a follow-up surgery to remove that tissue. If you don't, it becomes necrotic and you can develop systemic infections like sepsis. Those are deadly. People die every year from these chemical abortions. The complications from follow-up surgery, I mean, there are complications for that, talking about trauma to reproductive tissues like perforated uterus, scarring on the fallopian tubes. These can cause infertility. They increase the rate of reproductive system cancers, in addition to all of the psychological and emotional trauma that moms and dads are dealing with, having the guilt and grief of having put their children to death. So, in the United States, we've been taught to think of swallowing a pill as an easy way to make your problems go away. That's actually not what happens. Even though we call it pill abortion, it is still a violent procedure that carries with it a lot of risks. Because of that, shortly after 2000, the federal government decided to institute a series of regulations on how those chemical abortion pills may be distributed. They have to be distributed under supervision of a medical doctor who performs an in-person physical examination evaluating for, among other things, ectopic pregnancy. Anybody know what ectopic pregnancy is? That's where baby implants somewhere outside of the womb. This is extremely problematic. It's usually lethal to baby and sometimes lethal to mom. That is because the tissues outside of the womb are not, they do not have a requisite blood supply, oxygen supply to feed baby, but they're also not elastic. They're not made to grow with baby. So as baby gets bigger, mom's tissues in, for example, the fallopian tube, which is the most common site for ectopic pregnancy, they won't stretch. They'll just burst. And then there's hemorrhaging. The problem is, I don't know if you guys know this, but you can't see a woman's reproductive tissues from the outside. And so when there is trauma to those tissues, oftentimes you don't detect that trauma until the symptoms are severe. Medication or chemical abortion does nothing for an ectopic pregnancy, right? Because remember, it's intended to shut off the blood supply to the placenta and cause labor in the womb. It does nothing for an ectopic pregnancy. So, if a woman has a positive pregnancy test, takes chemical abortion pills, and has an ectopic pregnancy, she's still at risk for that rupture of the tissues, and in fact, probably in a more dangerous situation because she thinks that the abortion pill is taking care of the pregnancy. So that's why the government requires an in-person physical examination to screen for ectopic pregnancy. Also, there's some training that goes along with the information that you have to give to women when they're receiving these abortion medications. So the first pill has to be distributed in person. The second pill can be taken at home, but they cannot be distributed by your local pharmacy. They have to be distributed by a licensed and regulated clinic and provider. That's the current state of things. There is a court case working its way through the system to remove those restrictions. So that, this is the goal, so that a lady may access chemical abortions at every neighborhood pharmacy, and every kitchen and bathroom will become an abortion clinic. Here's why that's a problem. Number one, our culture, even our gospel-motivated Voices for Life, have shown a great hesitancy to want to prosecute women for procuring their own abortions. Because we recognize that a lot of times when a woman opts for an abortion, she does so under pressure, right? I believe over 99% of women who elect to have an abortion do so because they feel trapped. I don't think anybody in their right mind chooses an abortion like you would choose a new car. I want the candy apple red 1966 notchback V6 Ford Mustang. Hooray, I'm excited about that. I don't think anybody chooses abortion like that. They choose abortion the way that a trapped animal chooses to bite its own leg off. Right? I feel like I have no other options. So, I don't necessarily believe that prosecuting women for procuring their own abortions is the right way to go. But given that that is the case, if chemical abortions become available over the counter, there is no regulation left. And that means that the last, the last preventative strategy that we have left is educating people. The good news, of course, is that's what the Christian Church and Lutherans for Life has been all about from the beginning. So, the Dobbs decision doesn't really change much for us. You know, we take a moment to give thanks to God that He has made the law more reflective of what is right and wrong. We give thanks to previous generations who have taught their children, who have influenced the culture, persuaded their neighbors, so that we didn't just accept mandatory abortion access as it was forced upon us. We continued to struggle against that as an injustice for the sake of our vulnerable neighbors. We give thanks for those things, but our mission remains the same. We are concerned primarily not about the laws of the land, but about the hearts and the minds of the neighbors that we come into contact with, which is why, if I may do anything, I would continue to plead with you as a congregation to be open and straightforward in speaking about the sanctity of life. That means calling abortion a sin by name and applying God's forgiveness to that sin and those people by name. We don't have to be fearful of offending. The truth is, talking about abortion as a sin is not the most offensive thing we say in the Christian church. The most offensive thing is, it's not just abortion that's sinful, it's everything you do. You are, by nature, sinful and unclean. And we say that loud and clear every week we gather together. That's the most offensive thing you cannot say to yourself. We're not afraid of that because we have the most powerful, positive, pro-life message in all of the universe. And it is tailor-made for issues like these, right? That God creates, redeems, and calls every human being from fertilization to forever to be His precious treasure. And that means we get to receive every neighbor as a gift and a privilege. Guys, when I encourage you to advocate for the sanctity of life, I'm not encouraging you to do something in addition to the gospel or the mission of the church. This is the heart of the gospel. This is the mission of church, the value of human life to God and to his people. That's what we're all about. So be courageous, be compassionate. So we've got to keep our eyes on the situation with chemical abortion. I don't know where the court case stands now. It seems likely that those restrictions are going to be removed at some point in the near future. And then the gloves kind of come off. Not only that, but sanctity of life issues are not limited to the beginning of life, not limited to surprise pregnancy. The proliferation of embryocidal technologies, the use of aborted fetal tissue in research, which came to our attention with the development of COVID vaccines. That there were, these cell lines that had been derived from aborted babies years ago that were being used for research, and that there are still today new cell lines being developed from recently aborted children. All of those things are concerned. Sanctity of life as it impacts how I view my body and my neighbor's body. Did you know Planned Parenthood, they're very smart, they're savvy, and recognizing that their business model is under pressure, they're beginning to pivot. And so Planned Parenthood has become one of the go-to places for transgender affirming care. There's a lot of money to be made in this cultural moment in providing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and reassignment surgery. Planned Parenthood never tires of coming up with new ways to ruin people's lives. So we're going to continue. The good news is, though, that the gospel never tires of finding new ways to save people's lives. And that's what we traffic in, guys. That's what it's about, bringing a message of joy and hope to a culture of anger and fear. And that is why I have the best job in the world. I really do love what I do and the message that we have as Lutherans for Life, because it's not about proving that we're right or shutting somebody up. It's about finding opportunities to tell the person right in front of us, your life is more precious than the culture tells you. So, that's kind of the first two questions to prime the pump. But I'm here at your disposal for kind of Q&A. So what questions do you have? Learning always happens better when it's directed by you guys. Yes, ma'am.
One of the most common criticisms of the pro-life movement is that we care about babies being born and then we don't care about them after that, which we know is not true. But how can we, especially in terms of things like adoption and resources for new moms who are choosing to keep their babies that were a surprise, how can we more effectively encourage, adoption practices and those kind of things, especially within our communities and the people that we know?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. I am always thankful when somebody says, you guys are only pro-birth, right? Because that opens the door to be able to say, have you ever heard of pregnancy resource centers, right? You want to talk about people who lay themselves out there, who open their hands and their hearts and their homes, not just to ensure that a baby is born, but ultimately the goal is to embrace people into our community, into our social networks, so that we get to share life with them all the way into eternity. Right? Our goal is not just to see a child be born or to see a marriage succeed. Our goal is to receive each person as a brother and sister with whom we may celebrate the blessings of Jesus Christ for all eternity. That's what makes gospel and Christianity so wonderful. And that is what many, many pregnancy resource centers are about. They are places where you can get material resources, but also emotional and social supports. I encourage people continue to connect with pregnancy resource centers, not just because the clients need them, but because it really is a lot of fun. This is how I got addicted to Sanctity of Life work. When I was a parish pastor, I served on the board of a pregnancy resource center. And it's a crazy thing. My wife and I, when we moved from our first call to our second call in Lafayette, Indiana, she was a stay-at-home mom. and she wanted some volunteering to do to keep from going crazy or turning into a kid herself, which is always the danger if you're a stay-at-home mom. You begin to think and act like a kid, and she didn't want to do that. So we got invited by a couple in the congregation to come to the fundraising banquet at the local Pregnancy Resource Center. Well, we were a young family with kids, single income. I was a church worker. We didn't have money. So when the pledge cards come out, what I put on there was, well, I'm a pastor. I can do pastor stuff, right? Well, they took me up on that. They're like, okay, we're launching our 40 Days for Life. Would you come and lead an opening prayer? Hey, that's what I love to do. Would you come do a devotion for the center staff? And eventually, they asked me to serve on the board because they always need Protestants to serve on the board. They always have lots of Roman Catholics, but not a lot of Protestants. And this is because, guys, Lutherans are really in a unique situation. I'm going to paint with too broad a brush and stereotype and inevitably offend somebody, but this is generally true. Evangelicals are less comfortable with Catholicism than Lutherans are, right? And so it's not often that you have a lot of evangelicals who are serving at those pregnancy resource centers. Lutherans are more comfortable with Anglicans, more comfortable. We feel like we're kind of in the middle. We can reach out to everybody, right? It doesn't bother us. So think about serving in those capacities. As I served on the board, I had the chance to participate in some of the programming to provide relationship counsel to the young men and women who were the center's clients, fatherhood mentoring. I even got to go into the local public high school and teach sexual risk avoidance. We used to call it abstinence education. Those kids loved that, and I loved that. In urban high school, kids are coming from broken homes, difficult situations, fighting for their life outside of school. We had a great time with that. And I got addicted to the miracles that God works on the front lines of people's lives like that. So if I can encourage you, become active as a volunteer or supporter of your local pregnancy resource center. You will not regret it. That's all any of us want as Christians, is just to have a front row seat to what our Heavenly Father is doing, and maybe once in a while we get to have a hand in it. This is a great way to do that. So there are more pregnancy resource centers across the country than there are abortion clinics. So get involved with them. Adoption continues to be an important area for attention. I have a few things to say about that. First of all, we have to repent and confess in the church that for too long we have only advocated adoption as a solution to infertility. Right? That's usually how we think about, oh, you can't have any kids of your own. Well, have you thought about adopting? Sometimes our desires align with other people's needs, and God uses that. But as Christians, our primary motivation to adopt is not what we want, it is what those kids need. Right? And even if you are building your family biologically, or you feel like you've completed your home, you are the experts. Nobody has a better home than you. You are a professional, successful celebrity home haver. And there are kids out there who desperately need that. God has given you an abundance of love and expertise in your home. Perhaps He is calling you to adopt or to foster. That's the second thing I'd like to say. The foster care system is not broken. Stop saying that. Okay? There are abuses. There are things that go wrong. Absolutely. Attention needs to be paid. Energy needs to be invested. Remember, though, the goal of the foster care system is not to place children for adoption. The goal of the foster care system is actually to keep families together. And so foster care, in most cases, is utilized as a short-term solution for an untenable home situation. Then work is done and attention is paid to that home situation to make it better so that kids can return and families can be healthy. That's the goal. Not all of the children who are, quote, in foster care are available for adoption. There are some. Okay? But fostering is not the same as adopting. And I would say the vast majority of foster families, I know so many foster families, they are motivated by the compassion of Christ. And so that is an opportunity as well that we can think about opening our homes. Now, The third thing I want to say about adoption and fostering is, in the Christian church, we always do a good job keeping adoption and foster care shiny, right? We always make sure it's polished and we dust it. So we sort of present it as this unqualified good thing, which it is. On the other hand, do remember, adoption and fostering don't happen unless something has gone wrong. Okay? And that means that children who are adopted or who are fostering come with significant trauma. And sometimes that affects their home placements. I have friends, colleagues, brothers in the ministry who have adopted children who struggle, like we all do, right? I'm very, very sympathetic to the young man or young woman experiencing a surprise pregnancy who says, "You don't understand, I can't have this baby, my life will be over." You're not wrong. It's not just a surprise pregnancy that ends your life, right? Every pregnancy, who you thought you were and who you dreamed you were going to become is dead, is gone, right? That's the bad news. It's a death to yourself. The good news is there is a new life waiting for you, right? And God and this child are going to turn you into a better version of yourself. But there are pregnancy is burdensome. That's why we call it childbearing, right? And raising children is burdensome. It is the hardest thing you will ever do, but it is also the best thing. And as a culture, I think we've become kind of allergic to hard stuff, and we've forgotten that a lot of times the best stuff is also the hardest. So, all of that is to say, we could do a lot better as a country by, I think, investing more funding, public funding. You want to talk about using public funding for something, and usually when people say, you're only pro-birth, you don't care about people after they're born, they're referring to their preferred social welfare policies that you're not supportive of, even though a lot of times our motivation to be opposed to a particular social welfare policy is because we believe in the sanctity of life, right? We don't believe that this policy is genuinely best for people in these situations. And I always say, have you ever asked? Have you ever asked people in that situation what they need instead of assuming? That goes especially for situations of like pregnancy and sexual assault. People are always saying, well, abortion needs to remain legal because of situations of rape or incest. Well, first of all, what differentiates rape from incest? I don't know that a child conceived by first-degree close relatives necessarily deserves a death sentence, unless you are prejudiced against the possibility for disabilities, which you might be, but at least be honest and own that. I think the real abuse of incest is that a person of power and authority takes advantage of a person who doesn't have power and authority. And in that case, it's a sexual assault. But has anybody ever asked victims of sexual assault what they want? Instead of thinking, gosh, if I was in their situation, this is what I would want. Because what we hear from people who have conceived as a result of sexual assault is two things. Number one, when they choose to abort their children, they say almost universally it was a second trauma that was worse than the first. And understand this, our culture advocates for the exceptions in case of sexual assault with such force that people who experience a pregnancy as a result of sexual assault do not feel like this is my free choice to make. What they feel like is, well, this is the choice that the culture expects me to make, right? This is the right thing to do that'll make it all better. The other thing that victims of sexual assault who conceive say is, when I chose to carry that child to term and raise her, she saved my life. That helped in my recovery process because I was able to take back control, right? I could take this thing that somebody else did to me for evil and bring something good out of it. Now, that's not going to be the case with everybody, but I do think we should do a lot more listening. So, why don't we take all of the money, the federal funds that we currently invest in family planning and abortion services, and use that to fund foster care, sexual assault survivor therapy programs, and adoption. Adoption is expensive. Is there any way that we can do anything about that? Well, you've got to remember that what makes adoption expensive is making sure that we are looking out for the child's best interests. So lots of home studies, lots of legal proceedings. These are necessary to make sure that kids are not being kidnapped, their health needs are not being overlooked, they're not being placed in difficult home situations. So I don't think there's much we can do to defray the cost. We can subsidize that, and there are some states where there are lots of tax breaks for people who are active in adopting. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good use of public funding because our civilization, our culture, our nation becomes stronger whenever we provide for the weakest among us. So taking care of orphans is one way to do that. It's a long answer to a short question, but it's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking to you were speaking a little bit about fatherhood, mentoring. Just my observation, I'm a OB nurse and mom baby nurse.
Mm-hmm.
I have, a lot of unmarried. I would say the majority of people giving are unmarried.
Yep.
Are there ways that we can, I don't know, reach out? I mean,
Yeah.
and a lot of fathers, I would say, are frankly really unqualified to be fathers.
Well, the truth is we're all unqualified to be moms and dads. Yep.
Observation, but
Any of us who filled out the application.
very unlikely to continue to be involved even after the baby is born, which I'm sure is making a lot of people who decide to terminate pregnancy make that choice.
Absolutely.
They feel completely unsupported.
Oh, I can tell you, we have research statistics.
You need years of mentorship for these young men, though, I think, and I don't think that's present.
Yeah. So that in itself is an epidemic. Masculinity in Western civilization. I mean, you could write dissertations on the difficulties there. In one sense, abortion access has exacerbated that, right? Here's how the cultural thought process kind of went. We got to the middle of the 20th century and contraception made it possible for sex to be casual.
Yes.
Okay? What happened then was one of the sort of natural deterrents for men, and men's bodies are designed differently than women's bodies, right? I know somebody's going to assassinate me for saying the quiet part out loud, but that's a biological truth. You can oppose it at your own peril, but it remains true. Men's bodies are designed differently than women's bodies. Men's bodies are designed to be able to procreate with more frequency than women's bodies. Right?
True.
Yes, this is true. The physiological processes are just different. Okay? One of the natural ties, the deterrents for men to prevent them from procreating more frequently has always been the responsibility that you have to your offspring. Which I believe is also biologically designed into both men's and women's bodies. The sense of responsibility for your offspring. Contraception severed that link. Then we had, in the mid part of the 20th century, a good development, which was greater attention to mental health and domestic violence, right? So some behaviors and relationship dimensions that we had turned the other way from for a long time, we began to focus on. And so there was greater attention paid to women who were in perpetually difficult marriages. To respond to that, there was a nationwide movement towards no-fault divorce. So instead of the court exercising the responsibility to try and figure out what the problem was in the marriage, and before dissolving that marriage, work on addressing that problem, the court said it's just going to be easier if we say it doesn't matter what you say the problem is, we'll take your word for it. That made it even easier for men to detach. And so, add to that the final piece of the unholy trinity, which was the sexual revolution of the hippie generation, right? Free love, we're all just animals, sex is a natural appetite and desire like hunger or thirst. Why should you feel guilty about indulging that desire in any capacity that you see fit, with multiple partners, with objects that are inanimate, with animals? That was what the free love sexual revolution was all about. So what we found was, without all of the protective structures in place, men were going to procreate more frequently, which they started to do. Then the culture made the fateful decision that this isn't fair, it's not good for anybody. But rather than coming up with structures to discourage men from procreating more frequently, what the culture said was, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if guys can have casual sex, why shouldn't women be able to do that as well? Let's legalize abortion. So, as you can see, abortion access is not the problem, it's a symptom. The problem is our view of human nature, family, love, relationships, sexuality, which in the last 20 years, the confusion has become full-grown, right? We don't know what sex is about anymore. We don't know what the human body is about anymore. I don't want to think about it, you figure it out. Okay, I'll go figure it out. I'll lop body parts off, I'll stitch body parts on, and everybody's going to stand on the sidelines and say, good for you. How do we address this? Well, remember, the church still has the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the remedy. It is the remedy. What does that mean in a practical sense? Well, it means, first of all, that instead of wasting our time debating about, and I don't want to say this wrong, instead of wasting our time debating so much about what should or should not be women's rights, we should turn our attention to speaking directly to men and women and saying, what kind of man or woman do you want to be? And that includes speaking about abortion to men and saying, did you know that in 70 to 80% of abortions, the decision was made because the woman involved felt pressure from one or more significant males in her life. And those women also report that if just one significant male in her life had shown support for the pregnancy, she would not have made that decision. There is a hunger in our culture for genuine masculinity. It is a hunger amongst females, right? Females, I have to give you all the credit in the world because you never bought the lie that the sexual revolution sold, right? And here's, when do we have to be done?
You got 5 minutes. Sir.
5 minutes till worship starts?
No. Till we need to
Till we're done, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
10, 15.
No, 5.
Here's how I know that women have not bought the lie. Because of rapid onset gender dysphoria. This is the epidemic phenomenon of early and mid teenage girls who are choosing to identify as male. So a good proportion of new instances of transgenderism or gender dysphoria are amongst teenage girls. And that actually makes total sense to me. Here's why. Imagine you are a teenage girl who is looking at the possibility of becoming a woman. What kind of woman do I want to be? Well, the culture gives you two options. Option A is old first wave feminism, right? If you really want to be a good woman, you have to act like a man. That's what first wave feminism said, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So women should be encouraged to be aggressive and unemotional and logical and
Strong.
well, strong in an exaggerated caricature kind of way. They should be casually sexual, right? That's what first wave feminism said. And that's an option, right? If you want to be a woman, you be a man. Grow up and have it all. Be a CEO, be rich, be influential. Your other option, though, for being a woman in our culture is be hypersexualized. Your value is in your body, right? So over-sexualize it. I think our smart young girls are looking at those options and saying, I don't want either of those.
Yeah.
I guess I must not be a woman. I must be a guy, right? And that's how I know that women are not buying the lie that the sexual revolution sold, which was, this is going to make your life wonderful. Good for you, ladies, but then we have generations of women who are like, where is my man? Right? I'm holding out for somebody who I can go arm in arm through this life with, genuinely. And then we've got guys who are looking at a situation in which the culture has emasculated them. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. The progress that we've made in the last 150 years in recognizing the unique contributions of femininity, those are necessary, right? We need to celebrate the way God has designed women, but not at the expense of men, right? We also need to celebrate the way God has designed men. So you have the reason why the Lord of the Rings trilogy of movies is so popular amongst young people, especially young men, is because, guys, we are hardwired to be heroes.
Yes.
We want to go on adventures and quests, and we want to know, how can I do that in my daily life? How can I save the damsel in distress? Right? So that's the good news. We're in a culture that's hungry for that, and Christianity has that to give in spades. So, what's the most important thing we could do? First, affirm our young men in their masculinity and challenge them to grow up and be real men who protect and provide for the people around them, even at the cost of self-sacrifice. Secondly, after we affirm them, connect them to our local congregations. Because what we have that the culture doesn't have is generations, right? We have expert, successful, grown-ass men.
You're fine. Preach it.
Right? We got grandpas and veterans and guys who have done this who would love to mentor those guys for years. And that's exactly what they need. Be willing to be patient as they make mistakes along the way, but stick with them. There is no other structure in society that's providing this. So that's like job security for the Christian church.
You would think.
Again, we got to spend less time thinking about, can we get a new digital sign? And more time thinking about, what has God already given us in terms of our community that we can invest in the people around us, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the family structures that we have. Celebrate and enjoy your own family structures. Speak well of your spouses, of your children. Even that is going to make you stand out, and people are going to perk up, pay attention, and notice, because, again, they're hungry, they're desperate for that sort of thing. And that's what we've got. And that seems like a good place to conclude, like a high note. This is why Q&A never works out for me. I'm so excited to talk about all these sorts of things. You guys have great questions that kind of open up the door. So if I didn't get to your question, you can feel free to reach out to me on Lutherans for Life's website, www.lutherans, F-O-R, spell out the 4, life.org. My email is there, but also my personal cell phone number, which results in a lot of hoaxes for our organization, a lot of spam on my phone, but it's worth it. You can call me directly, you can text me directly, you can email me directly. If you have questions that I didn't get to, I'll be happy to address those sorts of things. Thank you guys for your attendance, your attention, your participation, your fellowship and support as Gospel Motivated Voices for Life, and God bless you.
All right, let's stand and pray the Lord's Prayer. Lord, remember us in your kingdom and teach us to pray.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation,